My parents destroyed my first startup and gave its clients to my sister. But when my $940 million cybersecurity empire made headlines, Mom texted, "Family dinner. No excuses." I walked in with, the first company I built had 12 clients in a shared office above a tire shop on Fletcher Avenue. I was 25. The desk was a door laid across two filing cabinets because I could not afford a real one. And the server rack sat in the closet next to the water heater where it overheated twice a month. Becker and Marsh were my first contract. $800 a month for network monitoring and quarterly audits. I filled out their intake form by hand because the printer was jammed and my handwriting covered every line of that page. There was a coffee ring on the back from the mug I was holding while the ink dried. I remember the weight of that mug and the way the paper curled slightly at the edges from the heat. That intake form was proof that something real had started. Within 6 months, I had 12 clients paying a combined $14,000 a month. It was not a fortune, but it was mine. Every dollar earned from cold calls and free consultations and showing up at business parks with a laptop and a pitch I had rewritten 40 times. The office still smelled like rubber from the tire shop below, and the ceiling tiles had water stains that changed shape when it rained. But the company was growing, and I was building something with my own hands. Then my parents got involved. My father, Wendell, sat me down at his dining table on a Sunday afternoon in October and told me Elara, my older sister, needed work. She had an MBA from a mid-tier state school and a resume that looked better on paper than it performed in interviews, and she had been unemployed for 4 months. He framed the suggestion as practical. "She is your sister, Soren. She has the business degree. You have the technical skills. Put her in the office. Let her handle the client-facing side, scheduling, invoicing, communication. You focus on what you are good at. She covers what you are not." My mother, Judith, nodded from the kitchen like the decision had already been discussed between them before I arrived. I asked Elara if she was interested. She said, "I think I could bring a lot to the table." She meant the client table. I thought she meant the work. Elara started on a Monday. She was professional for the first 2 weeks. She answered phones, organized the filing system, set up a shared calendar for client calls. On the third Friday, I left the office early to run a security audit for a new prospect. And when I came back the next Monday, the printer tray had a stack of warm pages sitting in it. Elara had printed the entire master client spreadsheet. Every contact name, every contract term, every billing cycle, every renewal date, every email address, every phone number. She had printed it, taken it home, and the copy she forgot in the tray was the duplicate. She did not even try to hide it. I told myself she was being thorough. I told myself she needed the information to do her job. I was 25, and I still believed that family members who worked in your office were working for you, not studying you. 3 weeks later, my father called all 12 of my clients personally. He used his name and his 30-year reputation as a local business owner, and he told each one that Soren's firm was restructuring and that Elara's new company, Ashford Digital Solutions, would be handling their accounts going forward. He called them one by one over a Saturday and Sunday while I was at a friend's wedding 2 hours away. By Monday morning, my phone had stopped ringing. By Wednesday, 3 clients had sent formal termination emails. By the end of the month, every single one had transferred. My mother, Judith, handled Elara's bookkeeping from the very first invoice, setting up the accounting software before Elara's company even had a registered domain name. I confronted my father at the same dining table where he had pitched me on bringing Elara in. He stood by the kitchen counter with his arms crossed and said it to my face. "You are running a toy business out of a closet above a tire shop and you think you are an entrepreneur? Your sister has an MBA. She has the relationships. She has the presentation. You have a broken printer and 12 clients who could not tell the difference. Give her the list, Soren. She will do more with it than you ever could." He said it like he was explaining gravity, like it was obvious. Like a 25-year-old who built a company from a door desk with no investors and no family money should be grateful that his older sister was willing to take what he had made. I did not give him the list. He had already taken it. The confrontation was a formality. The theft was finished before I walked into the room. The startup collapsed within 3 months. I could not replace 12 clients fast enough to cover rent, and the tire shop landlord gave me 30 days when I fell behind on the second payment. I spent those 30 days making cold calls from a list I had rebuilt from scratch, sitting in an office that now felt like a crime scene, pitching to strangers while the phone on the desk, the one that used to ring 8 times a day, sat there collecting dust. I closed 2 prospects, but neither signed before the eviction deadline. I packed my car on a Saturday morning. The office was already empty because most of the equipment had been leased in return. I took my personal laptop, a box of cables, and the clothes I kept in the closet for client meetings. The intake form was gone. Elara had taken it with the rest of the client files, and it was sitting in a cabinet in a company that carried her name on work I had built. I locked the door, left the key with the tire shop owner, and drove 4 hours to a city where I did not know anyone. Because staying in a town where my father's name was on the lips of every client I had lost was not something I could survive. I should have cut them off then. I know that. But I was 25 and broke and starting over, and the anger had not settled into clarity yet. It was still just pain, and pain does not give you a plan. It gives you distance. So I took the distance, and I waited without knowing what I was waiting for until the plan arrived on its own. I started over. I got a contract job at a managed services provider doing network monitoring for $12 an hour, which was less than some of my former clients had been paying me per hour as a consultant. I saved for 11 months, sleeping in a studio apartment with a radiator that clanked every 20 minutes and a window that faced a parking garage. I registered a new company, Blackwell Cybersecurity, and I began cold calling again from a folding table with a laptop and a pitch I had rewritten so many times, the opening line felt like a muscle memory. The first year I signed 4 clients. The second year I signed 9 more and hired my first employee, a part-time analyst who worked from his apartment. By year 3, I had an actual office, a team of 6, and a contract with a regional hospital system that doubled my revenue overnight. By year 5, I had Knox, government contracts, a SOC operations center in a building with my name on the lease, and a client base that stretched across 8 states. By year 7, when a national cybersecurity firm made an acquisition offer, I had 94 employees, operations in 12 states, and annual revenue that would have taken my father 3 lifetimes to match. The acquisition closed at $940 million. My personal stake, after 7 years of dilution across funding rounds, came to $47 million. The headline ran that evening on 3 business outlets and a cable news segment that ran my company photo beside the acquisition price in white text on a blue banner. By 9 that night, my phone was full of messages from people I had not heard from in years. College classmates, former coworkers from the managed services provider, a vendor I had used in year 2. All of them warm, all of them genuine. And then, sandwiched between a congratulations text from my first analyst and a LinkedIn notification I did not care about, there was my mother. Family dinner, no excuses. Not congratulations. Not I am proud of you. Not a question mark or an invitation. An instruction. Delivered in the same flat declarative tone she used when she told me to let Elara into the office 7 years ago. And when she called me a month later to ask why I was making this harder than it needs to be after the clients left. I read the text twice and set the phone on the nightstand. I had not been to that house in 7 years. I had not spoken to my father since the dining table confrontation. I had not spoken to my mother since a phone call in year 2 of the rebuild when she asked if I was still upset about the business thing. And I told her I was not upset, I was gone, and she said, "You will come around." And I said nothing, and the call ended. I had not spoken to Elara at all. They did not reach out when I was sleeping in a studio apartment with a radiator that clanked. They did not reach out when I signed my first client in the new city, or my 10th, or my 50th. They reached out when the number on the screen had enough commas to justify a Sunday dinner. That is not family. That is an invoice. But I was going to go, because I had something to bring. If you are new to this channel, subscribe to Betrayal Unfolded and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. I almost did not answer her text. My thumb hovered over the delete button for a solid 10 seconds. Then I reread it. No excuses. She did not write, "when you have time," or "if you want to." She wrote it like a summons. The same woman who watched my father gut my company and then set up the books for the replacement had the confidence to send me an order. That confidence told me something. She still thought the old version of me was operational. I need to go back 3 years to explain what happened next. When my company was in its 5th year, I got a phone call from a man named Cliff Merritt. Cliff was 62 years old, owned a small cybersecurity consulting firm, and had been my father's golf partner for over a decade. His company had just filed for bankruptcy. He was bitter and broke and had nothing left to protect, which made him the most honest person I had spoken to in years. "Your father invested $80,000 in my company, Soren. Cash, personal savings. He did it the same month your sister started at your office. He told me he would redirect your clients to me first because my firm had the capacity and yours was, in his words, too small to compete at scale. 3 of your 12 came through my firm. The rest he passed to Elara because I could not handle the volume. When my company went under, your father lost every cent. He never told your mother. He never told you. And he never called me again after the bankruptcy filing. I sat in my office with the phone pressed against my ear and the city skyline through the window, and I did not speak for a long time. Cliff waited. He was not calling to help me. He was calling because bitterness needs an audience, and I was the only person who would understand exactly what Wendell's $80,000 had cost. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I lost everything, and your father walked away like he had never been involved. He put $80,000 into my company, took your clients to feed it, and when the whole thing collapsed, he pretended he was never there. I want someone to know what kind of man he is, and I figured you already had a pretty good idea." I thanked him. I hung up. I sat with that information for 6 days before I told anyone, turning it over in my head like a stone I could not set down. My father had not destroyed my company out of love for Elara or belief in her MBA. He had destroyed it to protect a personal financial investment in a competitor. Elara was the overflow. The speech about the tire shop and the broken printer was a performance designed to make financial self-interest look like fatherly wisdom, and the investment returned nothing. Then I told Knox. Knox Devereaux was my COO. We met 4 years into the rebuild when he was freelancing cybersecurity audits, and I hired him for a 3-month contract that turned into a permanent position because he was better at the work than anyone I had interviewed before or since. He was 30 years old, precise, and the only person in my professional life who knew the full history of the first company because he had asked the right questions during his first week, and I had trusted him enough to answer without editing. When I told Knox about Cliff's call, he sat across from me in the conference room for 2 full minutes without speaking. He was reading my face the way he read network logs, looking for the pattern behind the data points. So it was never about Elara. It was about $80,000. And Elara was the cleanup crew. She got the clients Cliff could not handle, the leftover 9. Knox leaned back. He tapped his pen against the table once. "Your sister's company, Ashford Digital. Their revenue has been declining for 18 months. I have seen their client retention numbers in the industry reports. They are losing accounts every quarter." I knew Elara's firm had peaked at roughly $2 million a year in revenue around year 4 and had been sliding since. The clients she had stolen were aging out of their original contracts, and without the technical infrastructure I had built into the service packages, the product had thinned into something generic. She was running on referrals and her father's introductions, and both were drying up. "You could acquire it," Knox said. I did not respond for a while. The idea had been sitting in the back of my head since Cliff's call, but I had not let it move forward because I was not sure whether it was strategy or spite. Knox watched me think. "Through a holding entity, she would not know the buyer. Standard SPV structure, clean, legal. Your M&A team handles the paperwork. She signs. She gets paid fair market value, and every client she took comes back to the company they were stolen from. She will find out eventually. She will find out when you want her to find out. That is the point." That is what we did. 3 weeks before the $940 million headline, my M&A team structured the acquisition through a holding entity registered under a name that had no visible connection to me. Elara received an offer letter from what appeared to be a mid-market investment group consolidating regional cybersecurity firms. The offer was $2.1 million, fair market value for a company with declining revenue and aging contracts. Elara's attorney reviewed the terms. Her accountant reviewed the terms. Everything was clean because it was clean. There was no deception in the paperwork. The only thing Elara did not know was the name of the person behind the holding entity, and she did not ask because the check was real and the company was struggling and she needed the exit. She signed on a Tuesday afternoon in a conference room at her attorney's office. By Wednesday, the transition paperwork was filed with the state. By Thursday afternoon, every client that had been stolen from my first company 7 years ago was back under a roof with my name on it. The 12 accounts had shrunk to 8 over the years, as some businesses closed or switched providers. But the ones that remained were the originals. They were mine before they were anyone else's. If you have been following this story, you know what is coming. Subscribe to Betrayal Unfolded if you want to hear how it ends. 3 days after the headline, I drove to Elara's office, my office now. The strip mall parking lot was half empty, and the sign on the glass door still said Ashford Digital Solutions in dark blue letters that were starting to peel at the edges. I had the key. The receptionist was not in yet. The hallway smelled like commercial carpet cleaner and old coffee, and the fluorescent light above the kitchenette buzzed at a frequency I could feel behind my eyes. The staff had been notified of the acquisition, but not of the buyer's identity. I had the key. I walked past the front desk and down a short hallway to the back office where Elara had worked for 7 years. The staff had been notified of the acquisition, but not of the buyer's identity. And the 2 employees who were already in looked at me like a stranger with a key, which is exactly what I was. Elara's desk was clean, except for a small succulent in a white pot and a framed photo of her and our parents at some event I had not been invited to. Her computer was off. The filing cabinet stood against the wall. Gray metal, 3 drawers dented on the left side where someone had kicked it or dropped something heavy against it over the years. I opened the 3rd drawer. There was a folder labeled Original Clients in handwriting that was not mine. Elara's handwriting. I pulled it out and flipped through the tabs until I found it. The Becker and Marsh intake form, my handwriting on every line, my name at the bottom, the date, 7 years old. I turned it over and there it was. The coffee ring, faded to a light brown that was barely visible against the off-white paper, but unmistakable if you knew to look for it because you were the one who set the mug down. I held it for a long time. There is a specific feeling that comes from finding something you made with your own hands inside a place that was built on taking it from you. It is not anger. It is not satisfaction. It is recognition. The form knew it did not belong there. It had been waiting in the wrong drawer, in the wrong office, under the wrong name for 7 years. I almost left it. I stood there holding it and thought about sliding it back into the folder, closing the drawer and walking out. Let it stay in the archive of a company that no longer belonged to the person who stole it. Then I turned it over one more time and looked at the coffee ring, and I remembered the morning I filled it out. The mug balanced on the edge of a door desk, the printer jammed and humming, the water heater clicking behind the server rack in the closet. I could not leave my own handwriting in someone else's cabinet. I called Knox. He drove 40 minutes to meet me. When he arrived, I was sitting at Elara's desk holding the form. He looked at it, read the date, read the client name, and put his hand on my shoulder for 3 seconds. We are framing that. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. I put the form in a manila folder alongside the acquisition papers, sealed the envelope, and set it on the passenger seat of my car. The dinner was in 4 days. Day 7, the Blackwell dining room. I had not been inside this house in 7 years. The porch light was the same fixture my father installed when I was in high school, a brass carriage lamp that had been painted over twice. The front steps had been resurfaced. The mailbox was new. Everything else was the same, including the dining table visible through the front window, set for dinner like a stage arranged before the audience arrives. Judith opened the door and saw Knox standing beside me on the porch. Her face tightened in the way it does when a room she thought she controlled suddenly has a variable she did not plan for. "Who is this?" "My business partner, Knox Devereaux. He is staying for dinner." She did not argue, but her eyes moved to the manila folder under my arm and stayed there for a half-second longer than was casual. She said another place. Wendell was already at the table in his usual chair at the head, and he stood when I walked in and extended his hand like we were meeting at a networking event, like the last 7 years of silence had been a scheduling issue rather than a consequence. I shook it because refusing would have set the wrong tone for what I had planned. Elara was in the kitchen doorway, holding a glass of red wine, and she smiled at me with the specific warmth of a person who has convinced herself that time heals things she never apologized for. "Soren, it is good to see you." "Elara." Judith served roasted chicken and potatoes and green beans, the same meal she used to make on Sundays when I was a teenager, and the family still functioned like one. Wendell poured wine. Knox sat beside me and said nothing, reading the room the way he read a security environment, cataloging exits and vulnerabilities. The small talk lasted about 12 minutes. Judith asked about the acquisition. Wendell asked about the company structure, the team size, the client base, and every question carried the undertone of a man who was measuring something he wanted a piece of. Then he leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, and delivered what he clearly believed was a generous tribute. $940 million. Not bad for a kid who started above a tire shop. He said it like a toast, like the tire shop was a charming origin story instead of the office he had emptied. Like the broken printer and the door desk were nostalgic details in a success narrative he was now claiming partial authorship of. Elara lifted her glass. Judith smiled. I did not lift mine. I set the manila folder on the table beside my plate and looked at Knox. "Knox." Knox opened the folder. He read without inflection, without commentary, the way a person reads a legal filing into the record. 3 weeks ago, Blackwell Cybersecurity acquired a firm called Ashford Digital Solutions for $2.1 million through a holding entity. Ashford Digital Solutions was founded by Elara Blackwell 7 years ago. Its original client base consisted of 12 accounts previously serviced by Soren Blackwell's first firm, which ceased operations after those clients were redirected by Wendell Blackwell. The room stopped, not dramatically, quietly, the way a room stops when someone reads something that cannot be taken back. Elara set her wine glass down too slowly, like she was buying time with the motion. "You bought my company?" "I bought back what was mine." Elara's hand moved to the stem of her wine glass and stayed there, gripping it. "I did not know the buyer was you. The attorneys handled everything. The holding entity, the paperwork. I did not know." "I know you did not." That was the point. She opened her mouth to say something else, then closed it. Judith was looking between Elara and me, processing what Knox had read, running the timeline in her head. Wendell had not moved. His face was still holding the expression it had worn during the toast, but the muscles under it had gone rigid. I reached into the folder and set the intake form on the table beside the acquisition papers. Becker and Marsh. My handwriting. The coffee ring faintly visible through the back of the page. "This was in your filing cabinet, Elara. Third drawer, folder labeled Original Clients. I filled this out when I was 25, in a room above a tire shop, with a broken printer and a coffee mug balanced on the edge of a desk I made from a door." Wendell's eyes moved to the form. He did not pick it up. He looked at it the way a person looks at a photograph they forgot existed. "Dad, why did you redirect my clients to Cliff Merritt before you gave them to Elara?" Cliff Merritt's name landed in that room like a stone dropped into still water. Wendell's fork, halfway to his mouth, stopped. He set it on the plate, and the metal against ceramic was the loudest sound in the house. His left hand dropped below the table and stayed there, gripping something I could not see. His mouth opened. His tongue touched his lower lip. He looked like a man trying to remember a lie he had told so long ago he had forgotten it was a lie. "Cliff called me 3 years ago, Dad, after his company went bankrupt. He told me about the $80,000 you invested in his firm. You redirected 3 of my clients to him first because his company was the one you had money in. The other 9 went to Elara because Cliff could not handle the volume. You did not destroy my company for Elara. You destroyed it to protect your own investment, and the investment returned nothing." Wendell did not look at Judith. He did not look at Elara. He stared at the salt shaker in the center of the table, as if it was the only neutral object left in the room. Judith leaned forward. Her voice shifted into the register she used when she believed she was the reasonable person in the room. You could not even keep a dozen clients when you were 25 years old. You needed your sister and you call it stealing. If those clients wanted to stay with you, they would have stayed. Your father helped you. He helped Elara. The only difference is she knew how to keep what she was given. Whatever you have now, you did not build it alone. Nobody builds anything alone. So stop acting like the world owes you a standing ovation for doing what Elara did with less noise. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I spoke, and I did not raise my voice, because the numbers were louder than anything I could shout. 7 years ago, I had 12 clients. You called each one of them Dad. You used your name, your reputation, and you told them to leave me. You redirected 3 of them to Cliff Merritt's firm where you had $80,000 invested. The rest went to Elara. Mom handled the books. Nobody asked me. Nobody told me. I came to the office on a Monday and the phone had stopped ringing. You did not just take my clients. You took my first contract, my intake forms, my handwriting. You gave them to Elara and she put them in a filing cabinet and left them there for 7 years. And when I built something from nothing, when I started over in a city where I knew no one, when I worked for 7 years until the company was worth $940 million, the first thing Mom texted was not congratulations. It was family dinner, no excuses. You did not have excuses when you gutted my company. I do not need your dinner. Elara's water glass tilted in her hand. She caught it, but a line of water ran down the side onto the tablecloth in a thin streak that spread into the fabric. Wendell tried to regain the room. This is business, Soren. You are making it personal. You called it a toy business. You called me a kid with a broken printer. You told me she would do more with my clients than I ever could. That was personal the day you said it. Judith opened her mouth to respond, but I was not finished. Mom, you said nobody builds anything alone. You are right about the first company. Dad contributed. He contributed the phone calls that killed it. I built the second one from a folding table in a studio apartment with no investors and no family and no phone calls from a father offering to help. That company is worth $940 million, and your daughter's firm is a line item inside it. I looked at Wendell, then at Judith, then at Elara. You gave her 12 clients, and she built a $2 million company. I started with 0 and built one worth $940 million. I bought hers 3 weeks ago. Nobody spoke. Knox closed the folder quietly. Elara was looking at the intake form on the table, at the handwriting that was not hers, at the contract for a client she had been servicing for 7 years without ever having earned. Elara's company is a subsidiary of mine now. Her clients, my clients from 7 years ago, report to my infrastructure team. The $80,000 Dad lost on Cliff's firm is gone. I am not replacing it. I am not funding anything in this house. And the next time you want a family dinner, remember that the last time I was invited to this table, it was to hand over my client list. This table has cost me enough. I picked up the intake form and slid it back into the folder. Knox stood up. I pushed my chair back and we walked to the front door together. Judith sat with her hands in her lap, motionless. Wendell had not moved since I said Cliff's name. Elara was staring at the wet streak on the tablecloth where her water had spilled, tracing the edge of it with her fingernail like she was trying to find where the line stopped. We drove back in Knox's car. The highway was empty and the streetlights ran over the windshield in orange stripes. Neither of us spoke for the first 20 minutes. I was thinking about Wendell's face when I said Cliff's name, the way the color left his jaw first and then his forehead, the way his hand disappeared under the table like he was holding himself in place. I almost softened the haymaker when I saw his face at that table. He looked old in a way I had not noticed before, smaller in his chair than the man who had stood by the kitchen counter 7 years ago and called my company a toy business. The dining room light made the lines around his eyes deeper than they probably were, and for a half second I felt something close to guilt. But then I thought about the tire shop and the door desk and the 12 phone calls he made over a weekend to erase everything I had built so that his $80,000 bet would not have competition. He did not soften when he picked up the phone. I did not owe him softness when I picked up the folder. Knox broke the silence. Becker and Marsh's renewal is due next quarter. 3-year option. Send the paperwork. Already drafted. 11 days after the dinner, Judith called. It was a Wednesday evening. I was at the office finishing a transition report. Her voice was quiet and measured, the kind of deliberate calm a person practices in the mirror or in the car with the windows up before dialing. She had prepared this. Every word was placed. When your grandmother died, you were the one who held my hand at the funeral. You were 15. Your sister stood in the back. You held my hand for 2 hours. That is who you are, Soren. You are the one who holds on. Please hold on to this family. She delivered it like a closing argument. The grandmother, the funeral, the 15-year-old boy. She was asking me to be the version of myself that sacrificed for people who sacrificed nothing for him. She was asking me to hold on, when holding on was exactly the instinct that had cost me the first company. I held your hand because nobody told me not to. You should have held mine when Dad took my company. I hung up. She listened to the dead line for 4 seconds before putting the phone down. I know because Knox was in the room when I made the call, and I sat there holding the phone for 4 seconds myself before setting it on the desk. Knox did not comment. He picked up his coffee and walked back to his office. Some things do not need analysis. They just need a witness. On day 21, the managing partner at Becker and Marsh called Elara. Her name was Dana, and she had been Elara's primary contact for 7 years. She had signed the original transition paperwork when Wendell had redirected the account, and she had stayed with Ashford Digital through every renewal cycle without ever questioning the origin of the relationship. Now she had questions. I just received transition paperwork from Blackwell Cybersecurity, the company that acquired your firm. Elara, the founder's name is Soren Blackwell. Your brother, the same Soren whose name is on our original intake form from 7 years ago. I have the form in front of me right now. His handwriting. Were we his clients first? Elara could not deny it. The intake form had my handwriting on every line. The contract predated Ashford Digital by 3 months. Dana already knew the answer before she dialed. She was calling to make Elara say it out loud. We are going to stay with the new structure, but I needed to hear you say it. Dana hung up. Elara sat with the phone pressed against her ear for a while after the line went dead, listening to silence in an office that no longer carried her name on the door. On day 30, Elara went to the office for the final transition meeting. The sign had already been changed to a temporary placard with the Blackwell Cybersecurity logo. Her 8 employees were gathered in the conference room, being briefed by my infrastructure director, a woman Elara had never met, about reporting structures and system migrations. Nobody asked Elara to join the meeting. She was no longer the person anyone in that building reported to. She walked to her old office. The desk was cleared. The computer had been re-imaged. The filing cabinet stood against the wall with the 3rd drawer slightly open, and she could see that the original clients folder was gone. She took the nameplate from the door, the one that read Elara Blackwell, Managing Director, and put it in her handbag. It was the only thing in that building that had ever originated from her, and even that was mounted on a door frame she no longer owned. On day 28, Wendell drove to the grocery store 3 blocks from the house and pulled into a parking spot near the back of the lot, away from the entrance. He turned off the engine but did not get out. His phone was on the passenger seat. The screen was dark. He sat there with both hands on the steering wheel for a while, watching people push carts through the automatic doors, and then he picked up the phone and scrolled to my name. He held it for 9 seconds. I know this because Judith mentioned it to Knox during a phone call weeks later that Knox did not expect and I did not ask for. Wendell looked at the name on the screen and his thumb hovered over the call button, and then he set the phone face down on the leather seat so the screen pointed away from him, as if the name itself was something he could not look at for longer than 9 seconds without it becoming an action he would have to follow through on. He started the engine, backed out of the space, and drove home without buying anything. He did not try again. Wendell sits at his dining table now. The chair where I sat is pushed in against the edge. The chair where Knox sat is pushed in beside it. Nobody has moved them. The table is set for 2 most evenings, and Judith clears the extra places before Wendell comes downstairs because the empty settings made him stare at them for too long. The $80,000 is gone. Cliff's company is gone. My company is worth $940 million, and Wendell's name is on nothing, not a share certificate, Not a board seat, not an advisory title, not even a footnote in the acquisition filing. Elara calls less often. She deposited the $2.1 million and has not started anything new. The dining room is the same dimensions it has always been, but rooms feel larger when half the chairs are empty and the person who filled them is not coming back. My office is on the 16th floor of a building with a lobby that smells like marble polish and fresh coffee. The framed intake form hangs on the wall behind my desk. Becker and Marsh. $800 a month. My handwriting on every line. The coffee ring on the back is invisible behind the glass. But I know it is there the same way I know the mug was blue, and the ink was still drying, and the office smelled like rubber from the tire shop below. I do not frame the acquisition document. It is in a binder on the shelf between quarterly reports, filed under the letter A between two tabs, next to nothing important. I framed the $800 contract from the day I started because that is the one I filled out by hand when nobody was watching, and that is the one they stole, and that is the one I brought home. Knox knocks on the glass door. Becker and Marsh renewed. 3-year contract this time. I nod. The first client came back. The first one always matters the most. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Betrayal Unfolded. Every story on this channel is about the thing they took and the person who built it back.